Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. Hey, Marcy.
Hey, Dee.
Hey, everybody. Last week we had the live AMA. So we want to just thank everybody for coming to that and thank you for all your questions. Okay, so a few little updates. We are going to be ending season 1 with this episode. Marcy has some things going on. I have some things going on. So we're just going to take a few weeks of a break, kind of regroup, do some research, get some stuff prepped for season 2. Basically, the wrap of our stories is going to be tonight, and we might possibly kick off season 2 with our monthly AMA. Just depends on when we can get back to it, depending on how well all our stuff goes that we have to deal with.
So don't forget that you can find us on the links down below. It's Instagram, Facebook. All of those are down there. And then also we've got merch. So t-shirts.
Show your support with some t-shirts.
Yeah.
All right. So last non-live that we had, our last episode, was about me leaving, and it was kind of intertwined in with like my divorce and everything, and how that got me to realize some things about the cult, and kind of a couple years later I left. So Marcy, so since you were kind of out of the cult by the time that you got married, but we've talked kind of about your marriage, that you were divorced. So I guess the best way to wrap up our stories is to kind of go through that part of your story. Even though you were out of the cult, you know, I know you and I have talked about that the cult teachings were kind of still wrapped up into your, like, the way you handled your relationship.
Mhm.
So even being out of it for a couple of years or whatever it was, you know, that still affected your relationship. So why don't you go ahead and tell us, you know, kind of about your marriage and your story.
Yes, I had only been out of it for, let's see, I met him in 2009. So I had been out of it for 5 years by then, but I was still very much in a fundamental mindset. And so my psyche was still very mixed up in that. I was still unraveling a lot of that. And I think that a good portion of that unraveling had not happened enough to maybe give me a better view or be able to catch some of the red flags that were there. Now, I know you mentioned that with your ex that you probably wouldn't have listened to people even when they raised, you know, questions. And I did the same thing. I didn't listen. I was just too wrapped up in it when people did raise red flags about it. But it is what it is with relationships.
Right. So like, I know for me, a lot of it, I was able to explain it away by like, you know, we were super young right before we got married. We both turned 23.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was, well, he's still immature. He has some growing up to do.
Yeah.
So you can excuse some of the behavior as like, we're young.
Yes.
Did you have any of that?
No, because we were both 30 by the time that we met at the tail end of 29 and then got married at 30. So I didn't use the age thing. He did tell me that he was a believer, and I explained some of it, just not as because I wasn't going to church either, and I was still figuring out what I believed as far as the church went. I was willing to let more of those things slide because I didn't want to be really strict about things. And so I let what he told me slide, or that it was small enough. I just didn't worry about the religious part as much as probably what I should have. And I think he told me some things that I came to find out later weren't true. Like he claimed it, but it wasn't wasn't there. And I rationalized it. There was a lot of rationalization there. So we met in 2009, and the way that we met was through Craigslist.
Right.
So I
Do
think
you
we might have shared that on another episode, but it was
did?
through a dare. So we met that way, and we went on a few dates, and we're pretty much just stuck at the hip after just a few dates. It was pretty intense as far as interest levels go. So within a year and maybe about like 15 months, we were married. So we
Okay.
met in February. We were engaged by Thanksgiving, and we were married by the next May. I had parents were had misgivings, but mostly because he wasn't within the cult or wasn't within the church as they would have seen it. So I dismissed a lot of their misgivings just as them being way too strict and wanting me to do it courtship the same way that they had always wanted me to do it. So I dismissed those. The ones that I wish I had listened to was some siblings had raised a few concerns, and then a really close friend of mine, like a best friend, raised some concerns. And she was coming out of a really bad marriage relationship too, and so she knew the signs to look for. And if I had listened to her, then I probably wouldn't have been as stuck as I was. But part of some manipulation that happened with him there was that he tried to he made it so that he cut me off from friends and any kind of outside influence that would have talked me out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was too complicated to go into that story now, but the way that it rolled, I ended up cutting off friendships with at least 2 people that were trying to speak to me about it and warn me through some of his manipulations.
So I have a question about that because that kind of happened to me a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
Would he almost like pit you against your friend and like
Mm-hmm.
use
Yeah.
some of what they were saying to like manipulate the situation to turn it around to like your friend is trying to destroy your relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing happened with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Without going into too much of the story, there were some trust things that happened on the fringe side, but there were also some things
Mhm.
that he twisted it to make it so that I was right in the middle of all the things. And it just, it was bad all the way around.
Right, right. So
And,
he used whatever situation it was to his advantage
yeah.
and
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, well, I can use this to twist it and
Yes.
make it and manipulate." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So that made me have to cut them off. He knew I wasn't going to listen to family at that point.
Mhm.
And after it ended, now I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit, but after it ended and I went to counseling, looking back, once I learned some of the counseling things and what to look for, and I learned a lot of things about narcissism. And
Mhm.
I can't diagnose anyone, but a lot of his behavior fit those things. When I looked back, I can tell you the week that the grooming started for me, and it
Mm.
was a week after we got married. As soon as I
Mm.
was quote unquote his, the
Mhm.
grooming started. And it was
Wow.
very, very slow. It was like, that illustration where the toad will stay in the water as it gets hotter and hotter because it
Mhm.
doesn't realize that it's going to be boiled eventually. That's
Yeah.
kind of what happened with me. It just started so small and just built so slowly that I didn't realize I was boiling alive by the end.
So just to pause really quick right here for anybody who is not aware of what grooming is, do
Yes.
you know what the definition or kind of the gist of grooming so our listeners who may not be aware of what that is?
Don't know the exact definition, but grooming to me is if you want control of someone, you start teaching them how you want them to react to you. You start either denying things. The way he did it was he denied things. He would stay on his computer for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. He would deny me time with him, or there was other things that he would deny, so
Okay,
that it kept
so
me in a begging state.
I just Googled this. So
Okay,
this
good.
is
Give us
from
a
a
definition.
yeah. So basically, it's manipulative behaviors that the abuser uses to gain access to a victim, coerce them to agree to the abuse, or reduce the risk of being caught. So it's basically just kind of slowly manipulating situations to their advantage, as how I would describe it.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that seems, yeah, a good description of what
yeah.
happened. So we got married in May, and he went back to school, and so I kind of kept us afloat while he was in school.
Mhm.
And the agreement was that once he was done with school, then I would go back to school and he would keep us afloat on his job while I went back. And I did a few like um, undergrad courses, math and English and
Mhm.
stuff that I didn't already have in the middle of that. But it was me working and him at school.
Mhm.
And then once he graduated, he got a job offer in St. Louis, which moved us away from family here in Tulsa, 6 hours away up there.
Mhm.
And what he didn't tell me at the time was that the only reason he got the job was because it was his dad's connections there. I realized that later. And his dad lived up there, so it put us closer to his dad, but his dad's not that involved. So it took me away from my family support. So
Mhm.
it was just one more step of not having
Isolation.
that support. So we lived up there for 4 years. And so once he was done with his school and he was working, it was supposed to be my turn, right? Which it never did, went the other opposite direction. He wasn't willing to support to let me go back to school, or when I insisted and went and started nursing school, he freaked out, flipped out.
Oh,
it wasn't
wow.
it wasn't but by then we also had a house and there were some other things too. And then within a month of me going back to nursing school, I got pregnant with our first. And I think that the abuse was more mental emotional there at the
Mhm.
beginning. It was very subtle grooming, and then it got worse and worse where if I disagreed, then he wouldn't do anything to me physically, but he would back me into the corner of a kitchen and he would punch things over my head. He would hit me, but he would
Mhm.
hit things over my head. He'd punch doors. There wasn't a rent house that we lived in that didn't have a door with a punched hole
Wow.
in it. And come to find out, he was an alcoholic. Now, I didn't come from a background of drinking, and so I didn't know the signs of alcoholism. Otherwise, I might have been able to pick up on that a little bit earlier, but I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
And I knew it was a lot, but I didn't realize it was excessive because there was no way for me to gauge what was too much and what wasn't. I just knew that occasionally he would go a little too far and then wake me up and we'd end up with a hole in the door. So, but it never occurred to me that it was true alcoholism until much, much later in the relationship.
Okay.
So, really naive on that point, too.
Like, so how long into your marriage was it before y'all moved away?
We were in Tulsa for 3 years.
Okay.
So, it took that long
Okay.
for him to get done with school and then us move. So, it was 3 years in. We were together almost 7 by the time we split.
Okay.
So, the last 4 years was in St. Louis because we lived there for 4 years.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's where the babies were born.
Mhm.
So Embry arrived probably year 5, I think.
Okay.
And he knew I wanted kids all along. It was kind of at my insistence. Since I was 35 and I was, biological clock was ticking. So I really wanted
Mhm.
children. And then she ended up arriving in the middle of nursing school. So I thought I would just do that one semester. I would have her take 6 weeks off, go back to nursing school. Well, she had like a week-long stay in the NICU because she was so small when she was born. She
Mhm.
had some complications. And then he stroked within a week of her birth.
Oh, I
And
remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that put him in a disabled state. So he
Mhm.
couldn't work. And I had a newborn. So I had a disabled husband and a newborn. So I quit nursing school and went back to work and
Mhm.
I wasn't even keeping us afloat with what I could bring in because we needed both incomes. And that was a huge struggle. The stroke, I believe, changed his mental state
Mhm.
enough that it went from just mental and emotional abuse with occasional broken door to full on dangerous behavior. So things like lighting gas stoves and filling the house with gas in the middle of the night because he was so inebriated
Gosh,
that he was
wow.
trying to light this old 1960s stove that I wasn't even aware that was connected to gas.
Yeah.
But thankfully he got us out in time, but it really could have been a really life-threatening
Wow.
thing. And the drinking got bad enough that then he started breaking windows, which sprayed glass to children. It just got a lot more violent.
Just a minute. So you were saying
That it just got more violent.
oh, yeah,
His
physical.
behavior
Okay.
just got more violent as we went on. Things started happening where I was really scared for my safety and also for my daughters. I think another thing that was affected with the stroke was that he lost his some of his long term and a lot of his short term memory.
Mm.
So in the process of doing that, I found out about a bunch of lies because he couldn't keep up with them. He couldn't
Mm.
remember what he had
Mhm.
told me. And so then a
Oh.
lot of truth came out that he had been lying from the very beginning. So 7 years worth of lies came
Wow.
out. And one of my rules at the beginning for him was, you don't beat on me or my kids. Didn't know there was such a thing as mental and emotional abuse, so didn't put that
Didn't
in there.
notice.
But and I said, you don't cheat on me and you don't lie to me. Any one of those three things, I will leave you faster than spit. But outside of that, I'm going to be a loyal and true wife, and I will walk through whatever life throws at you. So that's what I was
Mhm.
trying to do with the stroke, and that I was trying to be
Yeah.
very loyal and be very helpful. He was extremely difficult in all of that. I had
Mhm.
I had heart doctors yelling at me and stroke doctors, and because he was so difficult.
Oh,
um
wow.
so anyway, it's neither here nor there, but so also that came out, the lies that had been told all those years. And
Wow.
I think that's where the break started, was that I realized
Mhm.
I had been lied to and that I couldn't trust anything. And
Mhm.
then the behavior escalated to where it was dangerous for us. And I think I probably would have stayed longer had it not been for the kids, but Mama Bear kicked in.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't just about me anymore, it was about them. And so then I was, being protective of them.
So so right after your first child was born, he had the
Mhm.
stroke, and
Yes.
so you were trying to work, take care
Yes.
of him,
Yes.
take care of a baby,
Hmm.
and then they're not very far apart, are they?
They're not. So they're only 20 months apart. So Embry was much desired and planned for. River was a surprise in the
Mhm.
middle of all that, a blessed
Yeah.
surprise. But
Yeah.
so I was pregnant with the second one then. So I had probably tried to leave twice before I got pregnant with the second one.
Mhm.
And so once I got pregnant, then I felt like I had to stay, because then, I don't know, I just felt like I needed him to be a support, which that was ridiculous because there was never any support at all, ever. But
Right.
in my mind, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And
Right, like, always wanting that family unit to
yes,
stay intact, and it's
yes,
one thing to take one kid
yes,
and be on your own with one kid. It's a completely different thing to be on your own with 2 kids,
yes.
so close together,
Hmm.
such young ages, with
Hmm.
taking them away from their daddy. Like,
Yes.
I totally get that because I had that struggle as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the other thing. And I had a good friend that I left for 2 weeks one time
Mhm.
because it got so bad. And I came home to Oklahoma, and I left for those 2 weeks, and I was trying to decide whether to go back. And I was really early pregnant. I had actually already planned the family trip, and I was going to tell them that I was pregnant with the second one, and I had it all big old thing planned. Well, stuff went down and he got dangerous, and it was threatening, being life threatening. He was giving death threats because he was so angry. And so I had to call family in and say, come get me.
Mhm.
And so I stayed away for 2 weeks. And that
Mhm.
I talked to her later, and I said, I remember talking to you during this, and then I ended up going back. And she said, Marcy, you weren't ready to hear it.
Mhm.
She said, I knew you shouldn't go back then, but you weren't ready to hear me. And so I couldn't say anything. And which is
Yeah.
really true. So if I'm ever talking to people that have family that they're trying to help out of a situation like that, I just tell them to keep trying, because hopefully they
Yeah.
will eventually hear you. I just couldn't
Mhm.
hear it then. So I stayed
Yeah.
until the second one was newborn. So we left when she
Mhm.
was 10 weeks old.
Okay.
And it came to a head because he knew we were losing the house because I couldn't keep up with bills and he didn't work. And so we had gone into foreclosure, and I had been trying and trying to get him to leave with me to go come back to Oklahoma to try sell the house, leave, come somewhere where we could have family support because
Mhm.
of two babies,
Right.
and he couldn't work. So he was unwilling to do that. And so he knew that I was real close to just throwing in the towel and leaving.
Mhm.
And that was the night that he got real violent that caused me to leave. And so he got really drunk. He hid my phone and my keys and my
Mhm.
iPad because I had tried to run in the car before, which he had done crazy things with that. He knew that I would call for help, and he knew that I had used the iPad one other time to call for help. So he hid those things to make sure I couldn't get to him. And then he woke me up in the middle of the night, like at 3 in the morning, and wanted to argue about it or try to convince me not to go. And he was already, you know, inebriated, and I knew it wasn't going to do me any good to argue with him because I'd already tried that a million different times. And also the babies were asleep. So I took him outside and said, let's talk. I was going to try to calm him down outside.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't willing to argue with him, and I asked for my phone back, and he wouldn't give it to me. And he got real angry, and then he tried to lock me out of the house, which caused a fight because I wasn't going to let him lock me out of the house away from my typical baby, nursing baby, or my 2-year-old. And I didn't want that level. He was already at that level of violence. He wasn't going to be in a locked house with my children alone.
Right.
And so that caused a scuffle, and he ended up throwing me to the ground and holding me there for a little bit. And then he eventually released me. I think he kind of realized that he had crossed a line. And so then I hopped up barefoot. It was really super cold. It might even have been snowing because it was right around Christmas time. Ran across the street to a neighbor's house. And I think I tried 3 neighbors before somebody answered the door, because by then it was 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And an elderly couple across the street still had an old wall phone, like a landline, and they let me come in and call the police. And then, so when they came, they had already responded to like maybe 4 times issues with him when I had called for violence or death threats or erratic, like inebriated behavior or whatever. And they told me, we can't keep coming out here to you. And they said, do you want to press charges? And I said, well, is this actually, like, can I actually do that? So in my mind, I didn't have any grounds to press charges against him, even though he had just stolen all those things and tried to lock me out of the house and had like thrown me on the floor and held me down. In my mind, I was still not being abused. It still wasn't enough to press charges. That's how in control he had me. And the police officer gave me this really incredulous look and said, well, yeah, like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, you can do that. And I was like, okay, then do it. Then, okay, I'm done. Do it.
Yeah.
So they did. And my family came and got me. I still couldn't find my phone or my keys or anything. And I got a hold of him on Facebook on the computer. He forgot about the computer. So I was able to get on there and get on Messenger and message them and tell them what had happened. And they got to me and got me packed up and out in 24 hours.
So when that night happened, did they arrest him and take him away?
They did. They arrested him. They took him to the jail. We weren't sure how long he would be there, but it was like 2 days before Christmas. It was like Christmas Eve. So it was right in the middle of a holiday. And so it wasn't very fast that he could get him out.
Right.
Now, I had already gone and bailed him out a couple different times out of jail for different things, at least once, if not twice. One for driving inebriated and another one for, I forget what other one it was. But we had done several rounds of this where I had gone back and helped him out and waited for him in court and bailed him out and got the car out.
I don't mean to laugh. It's just because for me, like, I'm laughing because I tell my kids all the time, don't even call me.
Yeah, yes.
I'm not bailing you out of jail. If you do something stupid enough to get your butt in jail, you stay in there. Don't even call me. I said, if you know that you're going to do something stupid, you better know how much bail you're going to need, and it better be in your account, and somebody else better have access to it, because I ain't doing it.
Yes. And that is my opinion now. Like, that tells you how much I've grown from then to here.
Yes. So I was not trying to laugh at you or your story because, my gosh, that is heartbreaking. I was just laughing because it just made me think about what I tell my kids.
Some of the stuff I look back that I did for him that I let fly, that I thought was okay, or that I thought was my wifely duty to bail him out of jail. It is laughable. It is absolutely laughable. But I
Yeah.
really thought I was being the loyal wife and that I was sticking with him through thick and thin. And that even though he wasn't showing a shred of remorse
Mhm.
or intention of change, and even though I knew in my head that change wasn't going to happen, even if he promised it, because it had
Right.
never happened before. And this is
Right.
7 years of this, I still, for some reason, held on to that hope.
Do you think that is where, like, the cult teachings kind of melded into that?
Yes.
Like, so kind of explain that, how you like, how that tied into, like, your reasoning for all of this.
The cult teachings, we've gone over that a little bit,
Mhm.
where you're supposed to stick with your husband no matter what. Like, you're supposed to, the wife is supposed to yield to his decisions and yield your rights to things, I think, was another thought from the cult. So I was yielding
Mhm.
my rights to him helping around the house. I was yielding my rights to him being a responsible partner. I had always been in charge at home as far as meals and cleaning and all those adult things that you were supposed to do. It just didn't seem any different to me. And that was the
Mhm.
wife's place, was to run the home, right?
Mhm.
That's what we were taught. So
Right.
that's what I
Even
did. So
though at some point he wasn't working, he was at
exactly.
home.
Mhm.
Yeah, you were
Mhm.
handling it all,
Yeah.
plus working, taking care of the kids, and it was
Mhm.
all on your
Mhm.
shoulders, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of the cult teaching is also about being submissive,
Yeah.
even when your spouse, the husband, as a wife, even when the husband is in the wrong, even
Mhm.
when he is doing things that are not godly,
Right.
because that is supposed to change them, because you're showing them God's love and mercy and perfect, like, the perfect undeserved respect. Like,
Right.
you are giving them undeserved respect. So that's supposed to make them wake up and realize that, oh, I'm being treated better than I deserve.
Right. Which just feeds into the very narcissistic type of behavior that I was seeing. It became a source for him instead of, I thought that's what a submissive wife was supposed to
Right.
do. Was just,
Right.
and I hid a lot of his lies for him too. I would realize that what
Mhm.
he was telling people wasn't exactly right or wasn't exactly truthful. And that always bothered me, but I thought I was supposed to help him save face. That's another thing the cult
Mhm.
taught, was that no matter what, you respect your husband in public. You save face, you keep him from looking bad,
Yep.
you present a united front
Mhm.
and make it look good. And I was really good at wearing that
Mhm.
wet mask. So a lot of people didn't know that all this
Mhm.
stuff was happening. They didn't know that the cabinets were being punched. They didn't know the alcoholism was that bad. They
Mhm.
didn't know that he was lying through his teeth. Even his parents didn't know that
Mhm.
he was lying through his teeth to them, because
Wow.
I helped him save face. I eventually
Mhm.
got to the point where I wouldn't engage in the lie. I just wouldn't say no, that's not true. I would just remain silent. I just went
Mhm.
silent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So not to make anything, like, culminate, but just to keep yourself out of it. Yeah.
yes,
Kind of like you learned how to make a boundary.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not gonna be involved in it, but I'm not gonna make my situation worse either.
exactly. Because I
Yeah.
would get it at home if I rocked the boat at all. Then I
Yeah.
would pay for it,
Right.
either with the silent treatment or with, inebriated type of anger and rages. I
Mhm.
called him rages. He was in a
Yeah.
rage tonight, and he was particularly fond of waking me up at 3 in the morning and just raging and being really dangerous.
Oh, wow.
So I knew if
Nice.
I pushed back at all, if I stood up for
Mhm.
myself at all, I would pay for it. And
Yeah.
they say, statistically speaking, when a woman stands up for herself and finally says, I'm not going to take this anymore, that is the most dangerous moment for her
Mhm.
in an abusive situation. And I will tell you, that night that we were out on that porch, and
Mhm.
I stood up for myself. I didn't look down. I didn't cower like I normally did. I looked him in the eye and I said, I want my phone, and I'm not going to do this game of arguing with you. And the look in his eye was the scariest thing I think I have
Mm.
ever seen, because I really
Mhm.
thought he was going to take me out in that moment.
Wow.
And so it was true. So if I
Yeah.
don't know who all's been through this, or if you're in it, or, that is the dangerous moment. Thankfully, I walked out of it okay. They say statistically it takes 7 tries for an abused partner to leave if they try.
Yeah.
And it took me 4. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
I mean, I filed for divorce twice, but there were times where I would leave and go visit my sister or,
mhm.
different, breaks, you
Yes.
know.
Hmm.
So, trying to get the thing to diffuse so you can go back and
Yes.
try and make, like, okay, a lot of it was this was a lot of my experience was I would take responsibility for whatever happened.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I did this
Yes.
that caused you to do this. I'm sorry, I will change what I'm doing so you won't respond this way.
Yes.
And it didn't
Yes.
matter how many times I changed. I still got the same response no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
a lot of it for me too. And I would say I will change this, this, and this. I'm sorry. That's a lot of the thing too, is that I caused him to be angry. So it was
Mhm.
my fault for the situation because I made him angry. And I
Mhm.
think that's a lot of the cult too, because it was your job to make sure the man was okay. It's your
Yep.
job to make sure they don't lust after you with your
Mm.
clothing. It's your job to make sure your husband is happy no matter what. So I took on a lot of that responsibility, and it was always my
Yeah.
fault because I was the one that made him angry, which it was for things like I had too many lights on in the house,
Oh
or
my
he
gosh,
didn't
yes.
he didn't like what was for dinner, or I had made meatloaf too many times that month, or
Mm.
I wanted too much attention. So I asked him to just he wouldn't go to bed with me. He would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning playing video games and then come to bed at like 6 a.m. And that's when I had to get up to go to work. And then I would work all day and then come home in the evening. And he would just be getting up, and he might have 2 hours before he goes up to do his video games again and stay up all night. So he had his nights and days mixed up. So he never spent any time with me, and he never spent any time with our daughters.
Mhm.
So that was always my complaint. I want you to be with us at least a little bit,
Yeah.
Can you please stay awake long enough to be with us, especially on the weekends? And it
Mhm.
didn't seem to matter, but it was always me that was expecting too much of him.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Because God forbid you expect your husband to, like, want to be around you and your
Right.
children.
And at that point with the baby, I was like, it doesn't even matter about me anymore. I don't care if you spend time with me because this has been such a pattern with us now that I'm
Right.
not even going to fight that anymore. But at least spend time with your daughter. Like, at
Yeah.
least see your infant daughter for an hour while she's
Mhm.
awake. You can stay awake for an hour, that type of thing. So it just, yeah, that's kind of how it.
Mhm.
There's probably a lot more ways that it tied into the cult that I'm not thinking of now, but it definitely played into me
Right.
being duped into kind
That
of
gender role
that
that
gender role,
Mhm.
or even not seeing the signs of that narcissistic behavior that was happening, or the control,
Or
because
the abuse.
or the abuse, that there was other types of abuse. I didn't understand mental illness, and I didn't understand
Mhm.
that there are multiple types of abuse. I thought because I didn't have a black eye or bruises that I wasn't being abused and that
Mhm.
it wasn't legitimate. I even went to a couple of places to ask for help when I realized it was getting bad,
Mhm.
and they never asked me about those things. They only said, "Is he hurting you?" And I said, "Well, no, but he's doing all these other threatening things, and I don't know what to do." I was looking for a legitimate reason for me to be able to leave, like,
Mhm.
because I knew something was wrong. I knew it was
Mhm.
abuse. I just didn't know how to label it.
Right.
I didn't get any real true answers until I had actually left and come back to Oklahoma and found a good counselor that had
Mhm.
good, solid training that could give me answers for that.
That's one thing that I struggled with too because there wasn't physical bruises on me, and what marks the children had on them were all from spanking,
Yes.
and they were all typically
Hmm.
very subtle or they would go away pretty quickly.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I didn't document any of that and I should
Hmm.
have.
Hmm.
But I was also spanking my children at that time, so he would use, "Well, you do it too."
Yeah. Put you
Well,
on
I
game
do
for
it at your behest,
Yeah.
or I do it so it's not as bad as the ones you give.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. You're protecting him
So,
in that way. His
um
argument for me was always, well, I didn't do it though. Like when he punched the window out and
Mhm.
sprayed glass across a 12-foot room and it almost hit the toddler. Like if she hadn't gone around the corner in that split second, she would have been sprayed with glass. And I was livid. I was like, why would you do that when you saw her standing there? And, it was so dangerous. And he was like, but
Mhm.
it didn't happen. Like, I knew she wasn't going to get hurt. I knew
Right.
she wasn't going to get hurt when I hit the window.
Right.
And I was like, how could you have possibly known that?
Right.
Um,
In their mind, they reason it away, and
mhm.
it's like fact
Yes.
instead of,
Yes.
their
Yeah.
judgment call or
Yeah.
whatever, or, supposition, like,
Hmm.
I'm going to say this and I'm going to state it as fact
Yes.
because you can't argue with facts.
Yes. And they'll say
Yeah.
it over and over and over again so
Mhm.
much that you start believing it yourself.
Right.
Or you argue in such a loop that it just exhausts you so you don't argue against it
You're
anymore.
like,
No,
"Okay,
you know it's not
whatever."
right. Yes.
Right.
And I think the cult did that too. They would just
Mhm.
repeat something over and over and over again, or any arguments that you brought up, if you did,
Mhm.
then they would just, it was circular. So you never got to the end of it. It just went in a circle.
Right.
So I think
Right.
I was used to that too.
So it conditioned you to
Yes.
be like we've talked about, like these teachings basically set you up for being susceptible to abuse
Yes.
because it was abusive tactics that
Yes.
were used to rope you into these beliefs.
Hmm.
So it's familiar. And so
It
you're
was
like,
very familiar. It
yeah,
was very familiar, and
yeah.
anger was not unfamiliar to me from my past things either. So
Hmm.
any anger that he had, I thought I could assuage. I was very good at peacemaking and making sure that everybody was happy and calming that anger, and so
Yeah.
I did that for many years. Just calmed him down, like always calmed him down.
Wow.
Well, at the end, it came. I couldn't do it anymore. Like he just
Right.
wasn't calm downable. You just couldn't
Right.
talk him out of it.
Right.
Probably because of the stroke, but also because the drinking got worse.
Right.
And once somebody's that inebriated, there's no getting around that.
No, you
So
can't reason with intoxicated or,
no,
drugged.
no.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to have an argument with someone when they're completely high and then you're halfway through the argument and you're like, "Oh, word salad. Oh,
Yes,
yeah, we're having this
yes,
conversation. Never mind.
yes,
It's useless.
yes.
You won't remember a single thing that I'm saying right now." Like,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
then, like, the tangents that made no sense, and then you're like you look back and you're like, "Oh, yeah, they were high. No wonder we
Yes.
had the same argument
Yeah, he wouldn't
all the
remember
time."
things the next day ever. And I could never tell what he wasn't remembering because of the drinking, or what he was specifically not remembering on purpose because
Mhm.
it served the purpose that he needed
To
at the time.
manipulate the situation,
Yes.
right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And he also delighted in confusing me because that was another
Oh
tactic,
my
just
gosh,
and
yes.
or not remembering it. I don't remember it that way. You're remembering it wrong.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
so many
that's not what I
times.
meant. You took it wrong.
Yeah, like, there's only so many ways you can say things, and, like,
Yes.
when you say this, and this, it means this, and then you're like, "Do I not understand the human like, do I not understand English? Did I forget how to understand English out of, like, all the years, like, before we were married? Like, or the first couple of years of marriage, had a pretty good understanding of English language, and then all of a sudden, I'm this very confused person who doesn't know what words mean? Like,
Yes, yes. I lived in a constant state of confusion, and also with there at the
Mhm,
end with the two babies. Neither one of my babies slept well, especially the first
mhm.
one. She was a sick baby with ear
Oh god,
infections and
the
stuff, so I wasn't
exhaustion
getting
on
any
top of
sleep
it
at
all.
all,
Yeah.
like maybe 2 hours at a time,
Oh my
and
gracious, yeah.
not more than 4 or 5 hours a night. So I was just absolutely crazy with exhaustion.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and he
So
would
then your world is, like, even more, like,
it
confusing.
was just, I don't even know how I functioned. I found pizza in the dishwasher. It was ridiculous. It was nuts.
Mhm.
So
Things in the cabinet that should be in the fridge, yep.
yes, yes,
Mhm.
yep. Or make food and realize I forgot half the ingredients or something like that.
Yep. Yep.
But I had friends there that were huge support because the where I was working at the time was in a church daycare, and so the
Mhm.
people there, I think, realized that I was in a worse situation than what I thought. I mean,
Mm.
I remember sitting there and talking to them, and telling them, how do these wonderful women get so mixed up with these horrible, horrible men? This was coming out of my mouth when
Mhm.
I was living it. Like I was that
Mhm.
woman, and I
Mhm.
didn't even connect.
Yeah.
Like, I was living in constant abuse, and I was
Hmm.
saying, how do these lovely women get mixed up with such horrible men? Like, it just didn't compute for me at that
Right.
moment.
Oh, I totally. I mean, it's just the same as, how do adults get mixed up in a cult?
Yes,
It's the
yes,
same thing.
yes.
It's a slow melding of your mind. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like your brain is being burnt from the inside out,
Yes.
cuz it's like they get in there and they put a little nugget
Yeah.
and then there's another nugget built on that one and then
And
they
mostly out of fear.
yes.
Mostly out of fear. So I think a
Yes.
lot of the cult was fear based,
Mhm.
motivation for doing things, right? So the relationship also was fear based. So my
Mhm.
motivation for keeping me happy, or my motivation for doing whatever he asked me to do, was fear based. Either he'd
Mhm.
planted a fear of someone else or a situation so that it would motivate me to do what he wanted, or he planted things about himself. Like, he told me that he was a red beret, and that he had done secret black op missions, and that
Mhm.
he had full capability and training of being able to disappear without a trace. So he had planted that years before. And then when I wanted to leave,
Mhm.
and we had the one daughter and I was pregnant with a second, he knew I was about to leave, or that I was thinking I might have already left for a couple of days one time. So he came to me and he had a hold of the baby, and he said, I could take you out and I could disappear with her.
Mhm.
I said, are you telling me that you would kill me and take her? And he said, I wouldn't do that. I would never do that to you. I love you, but I could if I wanted to.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I said, you can't do that. I'm pregnant with your second child. Like, you can't do that to both. You couldn't do that to the baby, even if you wanted to do that to me. And he said, but I could just take her and disappear. No one would ever know, and they would never see me or her again. And so
Yeah.
he had already planted that belief
Mhm.
that he was capable of that
Mhm.
years before. And
Yeah.
so I really believed that in that moment. Come to find out, he didn't even make it through boot camp. So, but I didn't find out that out until after the stroke had happened and somebody else spilled the beans.
Oh.
So that was never truthful, but I believed it in the
Mhm.
moment.
Well, of
Mhm.
course, and it was a tool that he used to manipulate and control you,
Yeah, he
and
wanted me to stay. He wanted
mhm.
me to be fearful enough to stay.
Yeah. I know in my first marriage, a lot of the anger and outburst were directed at inanimate objects,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he
Mhm.
did work on his own vehicles, and the words that would come out of his mouth as a Bible believing fundamental Baptist man and the things he would say and do to his vehicles while he was
Mhm.
working on them
Mhm.
scared the living shit out of me. I'm like, if he gets that pissed at me,
Mhm.
that'll be me. If
Yeah.
he gets that pissed at my kids, that'll be my kids.
Yes.
I'm going to share this one story with you because, well, two things. So I have a question. Was there any point in y'all's relationship before marriage, or maybe even right after marriage, where you sat there and went, maybe I shouldn't marry this man, or maybe this is not who I married? Like this is not the person that I thought I was marrying, like at shortly
Um,
after.
yeah, it was the friend situation, the friend that was trying
Mhm.
to help me out. She had found some information on him, and she brought it to me and said, this
Mhm.
person is not who you think they are.
Mm.
And I was extremely angry with her for having gone that far to get the information on him. But
Oh.
it did make me take two steps back and say, maybe I don't know him. But there was
Oh.
enough gray area in the information that I was able to explain it away. Maybe this wasn't him. Maybe this information isn't true, or maybe she
Mm.
got the wrong person, or some. I'm absolutely positively certain that whatever she found was probably on him. like
Yeah.
now that I know who he is, and
Right.
I know all of that now, absolutely certain that she was absolutely right. And I've always felt bad that I broke it off in the way that I did,
Yeah.
and that I didn't listen to her. But that was the one moment where I thought, "Oh, baby, I need to back off." And then I
Mhm.
was able to explain it away, and I cut
Yeah.
her off.
That's kinda like the letter that I got from the friend from Florida telling me that there was past I didn't know about, which I had thought he had told me everything.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like this gray area of,
Mhm.
well, if I know everything, what I know is not bad.
Yeah.
It just didn't
Yeah.
work out, right?
Yeah.
So
Hindsight is 2020, but I really wish I had listened to her. And
yeah.
I've always felt bad that I hurt her in that.
So this is goes back to our last episode before
Mhm.
the live. Those little inklings of thoughts in your head that you have, if you are in a relationship with anyone that gives you that inkling of, maybe this isn't the right person, or this doesn't sit well with me, run.
Run. If
Run.
it even smells slightly like a lie, run.
There was, and I'll tell you, this is my story about that, is there was an inkling for me. There was a moment that I could have saved myself from it all.
Mhm.
I was standing at the back of the church with my dad, and I don't know if he remembers saying this to me,
Mhm.
but he turned to me before they opened the doors. I'm in my wedding gown. We've paid for the church, we paid for the reception, and he goes, "Are you sure?"
Mhm.
And my head goes, "Nope, I am not sure." And my body went, like my heart and my brain says, "No, no, 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 no." And I'm like, "But everybody is here. We've paid for it." Like
Mhm.
he would be devastated if he got left at the altar because he's already had 2 failed engagements. So, like, I was thinking about disappointing my whole entire family,
Mhm.
destroying this man
Mhm.
by leaving him, and wasting my parents' money, and it's like, in that moment, none of that would have really mattered because my family would have been like, "You did the right thing."
Yeah.
Because most of my family was not okay with it,
Yeah.
but they supported me anyway, and so I told my dad, "Yes, I'm sure," and I walked down the aisle, and 3 kids and almost 10 years later, and lots of money spent on a divorce. Yeah. So I could have say, and like I said, I love my kids. I'm very thankful for them. What I have gone through, I hope that I can use to help others avoid that,
Yeah, that's
you
kind of
know?
my take on my thing too, is that I wouldn't give my girls up for the world.
No.
And honestly, the strength that has been forged in me through this
Mhm.
fire that I had to walk through, probably I don't know if it would come about any other way. So I wouldn't choose to do it again. And I wish I had listened to people beforehand to avoid it.
Right,
But
but
also, I'm
we
going to
can
see the silver
use
lining, and I can use the strength
yeah.
that's been given to me. And maybe my story will help some women out there. I think for me, at the end, my family was a huge support, and the counseling that I got afterwards was huge. And the lady that I found, that it was just by accident. Well, actually, it was a God thing. The lady that I found, she had gone to the church that I grew up in. She was
Mhm.
also from an abusive marriage and had escaped it. She had gone back
Mm.
to school to become a counselor to help women like herself. So she was very aware of, I don't think she participated in the cult, but she was very aware of the cult teachings because the church pretty much functioned on them because it was
Mhm.
all ATI. And if they weren't in ATI, they lived the same thing. So,
Mhm.
or close to it. So she knew all that background. And so I was able to go in there and say, hey, this is what happened. I'm from ATI and I've gotten myself into this relationship, and now I'm back and I'm broken and I'm in ashes and I don't know what to do next. And I don't want to go back, but I'm afraid I'm going to go back. And she was able to walk me through each step of that and show me some diagrams of abusive relationships and show me what
Mhm.
true abuse was and show me what narcissists look like and show me what, pathological liars look like, and
Mhm.
let me compare some of those things so that I had a better understanding of what I was dealing with
Mhm.
and try to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
So she was instrumental in that.
That's wonderful.
And
I'm
it's hard to find
mm,
counselors that know all those things. Like you can find one
yeah.
fast or another. It's hard to find one with all of those things. But that was critical So I would say to our viewers, if you're in something like that, or even if you're just trying to come out of the cult, try to find someone that at least has a little bit of background in it, so that
Mhm.
they can. And she was very slow. I needed her to be very, very slow
Yeah.
with her counseling and with the truths that she was showing me, because otherwise I would have said no and the wall would have come up and I wouldn't have heard any of it.
It would have been too much too fast for you to
Yes.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I probably would have rejected it. So, um, but she didn't. She went real slow and she let me go at my own pace.
That's wonderful. That's
Mhm.
wonderful. Hold on real quick.
Where was I? So I was talking about,
I think you were talking
oh,
about your
the
counselor.
counselor, yes. So when I got back, it took me like probably 3 months to find a good counselor, and I had to go to like three of them before I found a good one. And one of them was even church based, and I got in on the first or second session, and I was like, whoa, this is absolutely just a regurgitation of what I came out of, and I will not do that
Mhm.
again
Yeah.
with the cult or with the fundamental church. And so I left that real fast. So don't be afraid to walk away from that. And then I found this other counselor that was able to have a religious background and give me some godly advice without it being too religious
Mhm.
and without it being connected to any of the cult ideas. And she had walked away from those ideas too. So she knew how to help with that. So next week, or no, the second season, when we come back for the second season, we're going to go into some mental health issues, do some little mini sessions on that sort of thing. So that kind of ties in with the counselor
Mhm.
idea.
And
Um,
we'll do like a series on the different forms of abuse,
yes.
and we'll go
Hmm.
into like almost like a checklist of
Hmm.
things that can be associated with each type of abuse. So if you are experiencing them or have experienced them, you are aware of what it was and you can try to avoid it in the future.
Yes. So like Dee and I both said that we saw checklists of things that, you know, helped us come out of that or
Mhm.
helped us identify what we were experiencing and put words to that. I think I
Mhm.
remember a lot of times not even having words. I knew it was wrong what I was experiencing. I just didn't have the words, or I needed permission to call it what it was. I needed
Yeah.
permission to call it abuse. And it took me several months
Mhm.
to call it that. Or I needed permission to call it a cult. Took me several years to say that. So we'll go over some of those things.
So we had talked about in a couple of episodes that I was planning on doing a collaboration with Dine in Psychology. Unfortunately, I'm a full-time working mom with this side thing. She's a full-time working therapist with her side thing, and our schedules have just not been able to cross paths in the right way. So, hopefully maybe in the future if things and our schedules get a little bit more freer, we'll be able to do that in the future possibly. But if not, please go look at her channel. I really love the way that she breaks down the things that she covers. It's a very good perspective. It's very hard to find non-judgmental and informative coverage of different cults and the high control groups, and I think she does a fabulous job. So please go support her. We really appreciate her channel. And then let's see, so be sure to follow us on all the social media pages for you to get an update on when season 2 will be starting, and for announcements of our next live for the month of April, if we can get to it. We may have to skip April, so just forewarning at this moment. It's kind of a play it by ear situation. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us this week on our episode, and we hope that you will come back for season 2. And
Come join the rebellion.
bye.
Bye.